to pause here briefly just to make sure that our technical is working properly. Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting on the Standing Committee on Social Development. My name is Caitlin Cleveland. I am the MLA for Cam Lake and the chair of this committee. I'd like to start off by allowing members to introduce themselves, and I'll start with the member to my left.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Katrina Knockleby. I'm the MLA for Great Slave.
Jane Whalen Armstrong, MLA for Mofi. Thank you.
Ron Bond-Cruz, Techo.
And we'll turn the floor over to the member who has joined us virtually.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rylan Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. We are also joined in the room by many staff members. We have our law clerk, Mr. Toby Kruger. We have our research advisor, Mahalia Yakplaya-Newmark. We have committee clerks, Amy Lizotte and Taylor Maxwell, as well as committee advisor, Pascal Erasmus. I'd like to thank the public for joining us here today. I know that this is a very difficult time in the territory, and we appreciate people taking the opportunity to listen in. This afternoon, the Standing Committee on Social Development is reviewing Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act. This bill is available on the Legislative Assembly website. Bill 81 represents Phase 1 amendments that serve to recognize the vital role of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous governments have in education, eliminate confusion about roles and responsibilities of the minister and education bodies, protect parental involvement in decisions around student grade placement and education program modifications, mandate the provision of student transportation, and support information sharing and accountability. It is committee's job to review legislation and provide feedback while holding the government accountable. Committee has carefully reviewed Bill 81, gathering feedback from stakeholders and the public. Committee held public hearings in Yellowknife, Inuvik, Norman Wells, and Delaney. Committee used this feedback to inform its discussions with the department about possible amendments to the bill. I would now like to invite the Honourable R.J. Simpson, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment, to deliver any opening remarks on Bill 81. Following the Minister's remarks, Committee will proceed with a clause-by-clause review. Minister Simpson, I'd first like to acknowledge that you are currently sitting in Grand Prairie after being evacuated from Hay River, and Committee greatly thanks you for still having the time to join us here today. And our condolences to both yourself, your family, and also your communities that you serve, as well as other members of this assembly as well. We have Emily Bonnet-Rouge, who is sitting here, who serves multiple communities that have been evacuated and devastated by the wildfires, as well as Emily Marcellus of Tabacha as well. And so our thoughts and prayers are with yourself and your constituents, and we thank you for continuing this work with us here today. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate those comments, Madam Chair. It's, I believe the last time I was in front of the committee for clause by clause, I was also an evacuee, but that was for a different emergency. But this has been some year, and it's been tough on everyone. I can tell you that. So I do appreciate us continuing forward with the work of the Assembly. So thank you for inviting me here to speak about Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2. I have a number of people online with me today. John McDonald, Deputy Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Sam Shannon, the Assistant Deputy Minister with Corporate Services. Laura Jeffrey with Justice, Legislation Division. Julia Mott, the Special Advisor to the Deputy Minister. And as always, my Ministerial Special Advisor, Ronna Sherrigan. Education, Culture and Employment is proposing amendments to the Education Act that support the priority of the 19th Legislative Assembly to increase student education outcomes to the same level as the rest of Canada. Bill 81 represents the first phase of amendments that make operational and technical improvements designed to improve the education system. A second phase will continue beyond the 19th Assembly to allow for more in-depth discussion with Indigenous governments, education bodies, and the public on the future of education governance in the Northwest Territories. Amendments proposed by Bill 81 serve to recognize the vital role Indigenous governments and peoples play in education, eliminate confusion about roles and responsibilities of the minister and education bodies, protect parental involvement in decisions around student grade placement and education program modifications, mandate the provision of student transportation, and support information sharing and accountability. These amendments help to address the findings and recommendations of the internal evaluations conducted by the department, as well as reports of the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. This legislative initiative was informed by the extensive public engagement that occurred in 2021, as well as detailed engagement sessions with education bodies towards the development of a legislative proposal and drafting instructions for a bill in 2022-2023. This concludes my opening remarks, and I will be pleased to answer any questions members have. And I do want, again, to thank committee. Education acts are unique creatures. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone is very passionate about it, so I really appreciate the work the committee's done and the public engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to give committee the opportunity to make comments or ask questions in regards to Bill 81. Open the floor up. Start with Emily Knockleby.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister and staff for being here today. This was one of the bills that we took on the road and did a fair amount of consultation ourselves as committee. And we definitely heard the concern of residents that really the meat and potatoes of the work was going to be part of phase 2 and just the sort of critical nature of that and how important it was to them. So it was a bit difficult to take the more administrative part on the road first when people really wanted to see and delve into the details of the actual Education Act. But it did show how passionate, as the Minister said, and invested everybody is in this. I think one thing that was really of note to me was when we visited Delaney was the comments around wanting to ensure that any act that was developed in the phase 2 would be compatible to any Indigenous governments that did decide to create their own Education Acts, as Delaney plans to. So I'm looking forward to seeing what will come out of the next phase of the Act, and that ensuring that there is a large Indigenous government and Indigenous input. I think one thing, though, that was really struck me is we've talked a lot about the education piece and the quality of education that children in the territories are receiving, and in particular the discrepancy between Indigenous children and non-Indigenous children. And what impacted me was the fact of even listening to someone share a story about a child that was a success through the education program in the Northwest Territories, but then upon leaving the territory and realizing that the level of education they had received had set them up to not succeed in their post-secondary endeavors, and that person returned to their home community, and eventually later they died by suicide. So it was, and I apologize for sharing this, but I think it's important that it be said, because this isn't just administrative details of an act. This is having a huge impact on people's lives, and we've had a lot of conversations around the Polytechnic University, which I'm in full support of. It does bring money into the territory. We need post-secondary here that's good and quality, but the whole conversation has really become, it's not going to be for the Indigenous children of the Northwest Territories or the people from communities. It's going to be for Southerners and for people in Yellowknife. And so I guess I just really wanted, I don't have a question for you, Minister, but I just really wanted to make these comments because this act is a lot more than what this first phase really just looks like on paper. And I just wanted to say that it's been deeply impressed upon me how important the next phase is going to be, and I really hope that it's going to be done right. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Emily Knockleby. Minister, would you like the floor?
Oh, sure, I can respond, and I appreciate those comments. Yeah, I think committee got a good taste of what we heard when we went over consultation, and that's the reason that these technical amendments, so that we can make some changes now that we hope will create positive results. But the governance part of it, the ownership part of education, that's all going to be dealt with in the next phase, and Indigenous governments will be very involved. And as to the comment about the Education Act being compatible with an Indigenous Government's Education Act, well, that's what we have to do is work together. Going forward, we're not the only government in the territory, and so we need to make sure that our laws are all in sync and work well together and complement each other where they can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Simpson. Emily Bonnet-Rouge.
Merci, Madam Chair, and merci for the Minister for appearing before us today. I just wanted to make some general comments regarding education. Of course, it was the biggest mandate that I carried into the Assembly in October 2019, and I painted many pictures to the Minister and to everyone on the floor of the House and through our committee meetings about the state of education in our small communities. Because I've stated, you know, we're sending our students south. I don't know, they're making it through loopholes and getting into post-secondary institutions. But once they're there, they're finding it very challenging. And they're coming home. And, you know, in my community, it didn't get dire as the previous, my colleague stated, you know, but they were all sad. And, you know, they fall into peer pressure that happens in our small communities. And that's where they're stuck, in that rut there. We're not really reaching out to help them. We're failing them in our education system. We're failing them, even advising them is another concern of mine. Like, what are we actually saying? And that was the big gist of my concern, is that we're not doing enough in these small communities, you know, to bolster our education system and offer the sciences, the challenging programs. Perhaps if we were challenging the students, there would be more interest, because now we're challenging them, you know, with homework and all this stuff. We've thrown it away. It's like our own teachers have given up. There's just nothing but complacency in our whole education system in the small communities. And my beef is that the department is not really paying attention or really even looking at that. For 4 years, I've never seen an action plan here. It's up in an administrative action plan. That's all I'm seeing at this point. We're going backwards in this area. We should have been addressing the education system in the communities. Like 4 years, I've been voicing my concerns. And I don't believe it's really being heard, or nobody's taken it seriously. You know, you might need a Royal Commission on Indigenous Education for the Northwest Territories, the next Assembly. Go out and speak to the people, because it's interesting you're mentioning in the next phase you're going to be talking with Indigenous people, because I was in a National Assembly in Fort Fitzgerald in July, and they were speaking about data education. So they're really working on something. So that's probably a positive thing, I guess I can say, or the next step that will all be coming up. And I just thought I had a question about, and it's really, you know, gets down to the crux of what the regional superintendent level, let's say for the Dead Show, our area, if they had any concerns with any of this stuff, or if it was ever presented to them at the Board of Trustees level, and if they had any comments or concerns about any of this stuff, Mussy.
Thank you. Emily Bonnet-Rouge, Minister.
Thank you. Yes, the education bodies were engaged on this. The superintendents, I'm sure they had comments. I'm not sure what specific comments came out of the date show in relation to these particular amendments. I can ask if the department has that information. So maybe through you, Madam Chair, I can hand it to the Deputy Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Minister McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Yes, I can confirm that throughout the development of this legislative initiative, from the early stages, engagement occurred with education bodies. So that would be the elected bodies themselves, either the DECs or the DEAs, as well as their superintendents. So that took place over the course of the Assembly, leading towards the introduction of this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister McDonald and Minister. Emily Bonnet-Rouge, do you have a follow-up question? Thank you, Emily Bonnet-Rouge. Emily Whalen Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister of Education. Yes, I just want to say that modernizing this Education Act is very important. Okay? It's very important for a lot of people in the Northwest Territories. And I just feel that I know that the minister still missed the opportunity of working with the Indigenous government in phase 1, not in phase 2. And because this act is going to affect, it's going to have an impact on the Indigenous children, especially in the small communities. And there is, we all know there is a discrepancy between small communities and a larger regional center, you know, the education level of our kids. And in the small communities, I know that a lot of parents and a lot of leaders are frustrated. And just like my colleague Ron said about, you know, kids, they go to college and they find out they're not at that level. And this is nothing new. It's been going on for quite some time, you know. So now was the time, modernizing, changing this Education Act, but do it in the right, you know, like do it with the Indigenous government. Then they can, you know, like, then we can work like we are partner, but still the message came from the top to the down, to top down. And it's, so it's good, there are some changes that he made, you know, but I feel like, you know, since this is a very important legislations that's going to affect all our children in small communities, but at least they're working on it, so which is good. And even in small communities, we do have issues with, we don't have speech and language pathologists. They're pulling that out now in a lot of small communities because they can't find anybody, they can't train anybody. And we've been talking about that too, about having some kind of a training plan to train our own locals so that they can work with our own kids. Not only that too, the multi-grade, that is also a disadvantage because a lot of schools, a lot of communities have multi-grade, and that's where a lot of our kids are losing out because they have one teacher teaching 2 or 3 grades. And that's, you don't see that in larger regional center, but you only see that in small communities. So I still feel, you know, like, I mean, this is where a lot of other mistakes that were made in the past could have been done here at level 1 or phase 1 of this Education Act. So yeah, it's just more of a comment because we're going to be hearing more from parents about this, and we've been hearing about it. And this year, a lot of Indigenous students went south, especially south, to attend post-secondary. I guess we will see by the time they come back in January or December and next spring, see how they, you know, how they did that school year, the upcoming school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Whalen Armstrong. Minister?
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments. And you know, the reason that you know, we are moving in a phased approach is so that we can work closely with Indigenous governments. Because you know, as I've heard these comments, this is affecting Indigenous people, and so we want to make sure that we are working closely, and that at the end of the day, there will be buy-in of a revamped act and a revamped governance system of education in the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Members, are there any additional questions or comments for the Minister? Minister, one of the things that we heard when we were on the road was a concern that because the language of phase 1 and phase 2 is being used, that the amendments made in phase 1 will no longer be on the table when the modernization of the Act takes place in future assemblies under the kind of title of phase 2. I'm wondering if you can speak to that because that was a concern of committee as well, is that once the Department of Education enters into that kind of phase 2, that everything is back on the table and that the entire Education Act is able to really be discussed with everyone at the table, with all of the stakeholders, and that every clause within the Act is kind of up for discussion and amendment. And I'd like to pass the floor back to yourself to touch on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the work in phase 1 is really a small fraction of the Education Act as a whole. And so when phase 2 begins, it really will be almost the idea of a repeal and replace. So the entire act is up for discussion. There's some things in here that will have to change because they likely won't make sense with a revamped governance system. They'll be obsolete. So yes, this in no way constricts future assemblies' ability to amend the Education Act, and I don't expect that and I know there's no desire to restrict that ability either. So everything will be on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for confirming that. I think that's very important to have on the public record. Does committee agree to proceed to a clause-by-clause review of Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2? Where possible, I will call clauses in groups. Does committee agree? Agree. Committee, we will defer the bill number and title until after consideration of the clauses. Please turn to page 3 of the bill. Clauses 1 to 5. Does committee agree? Agree. Clauses 6 to 11. Does committee agree? Agree. Clause 12, Emily Knockleby.
I move that Bill 81 be amended by adding the following after Clause 12. 12.1, subsection 40 brackets 2 is amended by striking out, quote, safety of a student, end quote, and substituting, quote, safety of a student or is a decision referred to in subsection 9 brackets 1, end quote.
The motion. Order to the motion. Question. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with this amendment?
I concur.
The minister concurs with the amendment. Thank you, Minister. Committee to Clause 12 as amended. Does committee agree? Agree. Thank you, Committee. Clauses 13 to 17. Does committee agree? Agree. Clauses 18 to 22. Does committee agree? Agreed. Clauses 23 to 25. Does committee agree? Agreed. Clause 26, Emily Bonnet-Rouge.
Move that clause 26 of Bill 81 be amended by deleting paragraph A.
Thank you, Emily Bonnet-Rouge. The motion is in order to the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with this amendment?
I concur.
The minister concurs with the amendment. Thank you, Minister. Committee to Clause 26 as amended. Does committee agree? Agree. Thank you, Committee. Clause 27, Emily Whelan Armstrong.
I move that Bill 81 be amended by deleting paragraph 27 bracket 1 and B and substituting the following. B by repealing paragraph E and.
The motion is ordered to the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with the amendment?
I concur.
The minister concurs with the amendment. Thank you, Minister. Committee to Clause 27 as amended. Does committee agree? Agree. Thank you, Committee. Clauses 28 and 29. Does committee agree? Agree. Clause 30, Emily Knockleby.
I move that Clause 30 of Bill 81 be amended. Bracket A, in that portion of proposed subsection 126.1 brackets 1, preceding paragraph brackets A by striking out, quote, the minister may, end quote, and substituting, quote, subsection to subsection brackets 3, the minister may, end quote, and by brackets B by adding the following after proposed subsection 126.1 brackets 2. Brackets 3, when establishing an oversight committee under subsection brackets 1, the minister shall A, provide notice to any Indigenous government having Aboriginal or treaty rights as set out in subsection 4.1 brackets 1 in the area over which the Oversight Committee's powers and duties extend. And B, provide in the terms of reference established under subsection brackets 2 in the participation of an Indigenous government referred to in a paragraph brackets A in the work of the Oversight Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Knockleby. The motion is in order to the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with this amendment?
I concur.
The minister concurs with the amendment. Thank you, minister. Committee to clause 30 as amended. Does committee agree? Thank you, committee. Clauses 31 and 32. Does committee agree? Clause 33, Emily Bonnetrouge.
That paragraph 33, brackets 4 of Bill 81 be amended by deleting proposed paragraph 151, brackets 4, brackets 8. Merci.
Thank you, Emily Bonnetrouge. The motion is in order to the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with the amendment?
I concur.
The minister concurs with the amendment. Thank you, minister. Committee to clause 33 as amended. Does committee agree? Thank you, committee. Clause 34, does committee agree? We will now return to the bill number and title. Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2. Does committee agree? Does the committee agree that Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2, is now ready for consideration in committee of the whole? Emily Knockleby.
I move that Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2, be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in committee of the whole. Thank you.
The motion is in order to the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Bill 81, an act to amend the Education Act number 2, will be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in committee of the whole. Thank you, Mr. Minister. I'd like to thank you again for joining us today from Grand Prairie and acknowledge your presence here today. We very much appreciate it. I'd also like to thank your staff for joining us here. Members, this concludes the public portion of our committee meeting today. Can I get a motion to go in camera? Thank you, Emily Bonnetrouge. I'd also like to thank the public who joined us here today. And stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.